Greetings, everyone. It's CM Kozaman again with a previously unseen format. Today, we have none other than TK Sivgin on our interview. He's also, like me, very interested in paleontology, speculative evolution, and like many of yourselves. So let's hear the introduction from Tolga.
My name is Timur Sivkin.
No problem. Yeah.
Sorry. I currently study history and earth system sciences at the University of Zurich. On the side, I work as a research assistant for Dr. Dennis Hansen at the Zoological Museum of Zurich. Online, I think I'm mostly known for my blog, Manus Spondylus, where I claim that I write about paleontology, but really lately I just write about whatever I want.
That's the best kind of writing.
And recently I also started a speculative evolution project with a friend of mine, Bob Guan is his name. It's called Rhynia.
Yes, I've seen it. It's really good. So apologies in advance to you and to our many viewers. It's my mistake for mistaking TK Sivgin and mistaking the T for Tolga rather than Timur. Timur's Patreon and all other links are in the video description. So for this video, please support him and not me. So, I mean, we've been corresponding with each other for a while, and usually the conversation flows very naturally. I mean, for example, your speculative evolution project, it's very unique. It's about an abandoned gigantic space station with many kinds of habitats inside, and for probably like 4 or 5 different worlds. So imagine
six and technically 7 if you count also like the interior of the ship that was not meant to be colonized, but eventually was.
So the great secret of that habitat is actually a wayward colonization mission that has become its own kind of space drifting Galapagos in a way.
Yeah, basically.
There was a science fiction story similar in the 1990s. It was called Marrow, M-A-R-R-O-W, and it was about basically a Jupiter-sized planet, which was actually a spaceship. And in the planet's core, there were many like moon-sized hollows, and all of these were inhabited by different fauna or different species. But the way you expose it, it's more about the nature and evolution of such an habitat. Whereas the science fiction I'm talking to you about, named Marrow, the author of which I cannot remember at the moment, it was more about the race of like nanotechnological godlike post-humans inhabiting it. But yeah, that was like something nice people can also look up. So Timur, people like us, I mean, there's you, there's me, there's many other people all over the world, in Australia, in the Philippines, in Sri Lanka. It's almost like a global awakening, or by another perspective, a global disease, like, because usually these interests in basically natural history and speculative evolution, they develop really independently. They like your creatures in your speculative evolution project, they develop spontaneously in different countries. Why do you think this is happening in this day and age?
Like, you mean that people come up with similar creatures at around the same time? Or
yes, also people are also interested in the same kinds of things.
I mean,
roughly at the same time.
Like, let's be honest, in part it's also plagiarism.
Yeah.
No, like that for legal reasons, that's a joke.
Yes.
Like, I mean, I don't like that. There is, of course, like convergent evolution, and there is parallel evolution, and sometimes people are presented with like the same basics and can still from that develop kind of the same idea because they were given the same start, sort of.
Yes.
So
I personally think it's got to do with the way we can reach information. And I think like this stuff was always very interesting, but like 2 generations ago, you could only read about it in books or in maybe 5 museums all around the planet. Then one generation ago, it was maybe like 8 or 6 different books. And now it's dozens of books and websites and platforms. And I think this thing always had an innate interest. But people who write and plan media always used to think in terms of narratives. But now, as more people wake up to the non-narrative world of the internet, I think it's mushrooming all over the place. But I would like ask you another question, the one that I also get a lot of times, which is to say, how do you come up with your ideas, and how do you come up with the energy to maintain and carry out those ideas into completion? Because many people have their own speculative evolution projects, but in the worst cases, they kind of run out of energy after maybe making 5 Instagram posts, or they scribble something on their notebooks, doesn't go anywhere. How do you like come up with the idea and sustain it? I really want to hear that from you.
Yeah, for that to answer that, I first need to clarify that this really is a collaborative project between me and Bob Guan. And Bob, he originally came up with the idea of this spaceship that was like colonized by Devonian life forms. Originally, I think he wanted it to be actually like a conlang project, and then it developed into a speculative evolution project. So like what I want to say by this, I cannot answer for his creatures, like he does most of the placoderms. But I have mostly designed, and he later illustrated for me because my art wasn't that good. Like
not as bad as you think. I've seen it. It's really good, actually.
Thank you. You mean the Swipling work? Thank you. So like I've come up with like the side creatures mostly, like the for example, there was this one animal I came up with, the Kriechhecht. So obviously I have to give it a German name, which is a Sarcopterygian that is like semi-aquatic. Like it's still obviously a fish, but it has already like front limbs adapted to crawl over short distance, and also it has a neck.
A bit like Tiktaalik, but with a neck, basically.
Like Tiktaalik, but it looks more like a gar. And you know, that's the thing. The simple idea I had a fish, but with like a short neck, because most fish don't really have a neck. And I don't know, like my idea, like my philosophy sometimes is just like looking at the limitations of some like animal groups and thinking, what if we played around with like this little bit and that, and then how much things just change from that point on.
Now that's a very good idea. I mean, looking at like, individual groups and working from them. Yeah, it's a like, really nice.
Just playing around with the anatomy even a little bit, and then just like how this like cascades into. Like you might have noticed from my blog, I'm a big fan of Stephen Jay Gould and especially A Wonderful Life, and his thesis that like all of history is like built on these like contingencies, and if you go farther back in time and like you go back into the Cambrian and accidentally step on a trilobite, you come back and I don't know, like there's like giant snails ruling Africa.
Well, be careful where we step then. Yes, this idea of contingency, Stephen Jay Gould, the book, It's a Wonderful Life, it's actually a very inspiring book. It really inspired me too back in the day. And
that's a very hopeful message, I think, at the
their
end.
Basic idea was, I think, like in the Cambrian period, you had also all of these like non-surviving phylums. Of course, in a cladistic sense, it doesn't really matter much. But like only one mistake, or not even mistakes, but like only chance kept one group from succeeding and others from not.
Yeah, that is the thing that stuck with me the most, that oftentimes we don't actually have a good basis to say on why this went extinct and this lived on, even though like in many even modern paleontological texts you see like the descendants. This group died out gradually because it was being outcompeted by the other one. But if you actually look at the data, it's never actually that clear. You know, like the South American interchange, for example, where North and South America met. many people say like animals like terror birds and stuff, they died out because they had to compete against like saber-toothed cats and dogs. But actually, like the terror birds did pretty well until 1 million years ago and went all the way far up into Texas.
But also, I'm reminded of the extinction of pterosaurs and like their supposed quote-unquote replacements by birds. And it's like every 5 years there's a new paper. First they say, oh, well, birds really helped them get extinct. Then they say, oh, actually no, they were like doing quite well and died out randomly. But no one's really sure. Also, it kind of assumes this like different animal clades are like different, basically medieval
teams.
houses or sports teams. Whereas like in reality, usually there's a lot of competition among species from a same group. But you know, animal species don't act with a kind of clade awareness, or if they did, it would be a vastly different kind of natural history.
Yeah, like sometimes this idea of, you know, survival of the fittest and, you know, like fierce competition, like it gets taken onto like this like metaphysical level almost. Yeah, like you said, like these are like these clades act like empires, you know,
nations,
and
basically. Yeah,
that is something in my bachelor's thesis I actually like wrote a bit about that, how we like project how we view human history and like project this back into like prehistory onto whole animal groups. And as you see that in like the old imagery of dinosaurs of the Cretaceous, how they look like before the dinosaur renaissance, how like Cretaceous dinosaurs are always like depicted as like these like decrepit and like decaying animals, almost zombie like, to like signal that their rule is coming to an end and like the mammals are coming now, and you know.
Yes,
and you see that a lot in like historical images for like the Byzantine Empire. I think it was is always similarly depicted to like these old dinosaur reconstructions, like how like they're so opulent and extravagant, but also like too ancient for their own good and like near collapse.
Well, that makes us Turks the mammals then. It's interesting.
the hair.
Well, okay. Actually, there was even this theory called evolutionary senescence or evolutionary.
I also wrote about that in the thesis. That was actually a very common idea that which surprised me.
The British were really big on it. They used to think that the groups and the evidence they give, even if you read the Webster's dictionary, which is like this enormous English dictionary, it's in that dictionary they say they probably died out due to evolutionary senescence or senescence. I might be spelling it wrong.
Senescence,
Senescence.
Because the senex is a senior in Latin.
Yeah, and then the dictionary says, obviously the DD dictionary has a very general view of things, but they say some of the final meat-eating species did not have teeth, and some of the final plant-eating species had outsized horns. But it's once again like, I mean, as if meat eaters were like a kingdom and they had grown up, and you know, there's this silly like good times create weak man create that kind of.
There is also like a lot of like eugenic ideas in that, because I think the basic hypothesis of racial senescence was that these animal families have existed for so long now that their genetics have like become deregulated and are running wild.
Which is actually kind of silly, because I mean, anything that is alive has genetics.
We all go back to like this Luca, this like one cell that lived 4 billion years ago.
But it's quite interesting that there are many assumptions that people just go with, even in contemporary paleontology. Like, are there any others you could name or mention? Because like one of our common areas of interest is like not just paleontology, but the theory of knowledge behind paleontology. And I mean, I must confess, you're far more better knowledgeable about this part of the issue than I am. So any other such general assumptions that we take for granted even today, what might they be?
I need to think about, like,
maybe something could be about agency, like, you know, especially with Richard Dawkins, and like,
yeah.
do genes have agency, or is it down to the individual, or I don't know, is there like a kind of group affliction?
Yeah, I get, like, one thing is that people assume that every attribute of an organism has like a Darwinistic purpose behind, like every attribute that an animal has a specific function that evolved for a specific reason. But that is not always the case, actually. Like, there is this, I remember this one German researcher, I don't know his name right now, but he was like the mentor of Mark McManaman, this Ediacaran researcher. It was a German paleontologist. Adolf Seilacher, yeah, I just now remembered the name. Like, he like once proved, for example, that like the color pattern on a specific snail species was not actually meant as a display or a signal. It was simply a product of how the shell grew, and that it actually had no, then the pattern was just a coincidence.
Yeah.
And it had no function. And like, sometimes we underestimate maybe like how many things in nature exist just because nobody bothered to like get rid of it, or
just because they are not detrimental.
Yeah, because it was not detrimental, or it had, even if it has no function.
In fact, I think in like speculative evolution art, people usually come up with a lot of mechanical solutions. People usually come up with a lot of organs and features that are actually there for a purpose.
Yeah.
And it's actually something that nature doesn't usually do. I mean, when nature does it, the products are extremely like bizarre and mechanical looking. And I think, for example, a good example could be the genitals of cephalopods, that they have this one extended arm, or those weird spiders with giraffe-like necks that.
Oh yeah, those, I just saw those in your video.
So when that happens, it's very rare and it's very beautiful. And I think one of the quirks of speculative evolution art is the ability to introduce more such, let's say, quote unquote, purposeful adaptations into a vast, the vastness of nature, which actually has no such adaptations, or very few. Like, many things are there because there are, and nature is actually very good at improvising if things go wrong. There are like, there's so much redundancy in nature. But then again, it's very fun to imagine a kind of animal with, let's say, a teeth that goes like a corkscrew, or like a big horn that helps it unlock a certain kind of food source. And I think that's a very, like, that's the fun of it, actually.
Yeah, that's like one thing I often like clash a bit with Bob when we do Rhynia stuff. Like, when I write a species profile, like, I always inject sometimes like some weird little traits of the animal that the in-universe author is also very confused by, and has like because that's like true to nature. Some animals do a lot of bullshit that to a human does not seem sensible, but it just happens.
Yeah.
And like Bob's issue when I do that is always, but we need to explain that somehow. And I'm like, do we?
Yeah, I remember, like, actually a lot of that quote unquote bullshit makes the animal and makes its image in people's minds. I used to remember, like, I was writing for Snayat that there's this one group of creatures that has black blood, and that's it. No one knows why. And things like that, you know.
Or the one that has like this big penis spike, and it's like they cut it, like for a test, they cut it off, and then it turned out it actually had like higher thickness.
Yeah. I remember.
What was the name of that guy? Like this like.
Oh, I used to call it Flip DICK, and this was one of the many edgy names. Yeah, it's one of the very edgy names. I also used to call it, I think, the Mikado creature, because there was a game called Mikado with many.
Yeah.
But I mean, today I would call it just like I would call it Stick Leaper or something like that. I'm grown past that stage. But yeah, I mean, I used to make many such things with Snayad, and I think maybe it could be a good takeaway to our viewers that if you're making a speculative evolution creature, first, okay, make the creatures, then go back and one out of every 3 creatures, give it some random trait, like, or it could something even be something very simple and poetic, that maybe there's this one animal that when they see the full moon, they start making this scream that they never do otherwise. And things like this are very poetic, but they also make it very lifelike. So in like a counterintuitive way, you have to inject a little chaos, inject a little fantasy and like pointlessness, in order to make your world.
Like you said that with the moon, like I think to this day we are not really sure why most insects are like attracted to light.
One of the great paradoxes of our
and why scorpions like glow in UV light, we also have no idea about that. And like people underestimate just how mysterious the world still is.
Exactly. I mean, there's just so many of them, and the smaller you get with all these animals, like if you start looking at like arachnids or insects, the smaller you get, the world grows incredibly, and like the mysteries of the world also grow. And I mean, just from my arachnids podcasts earlier this month, I used to notice that there's a little mites that go under the sun, and for some reason jumping spiders never attack them. Why are they like somehow toxic, or like, I don't know, just
maybe they're too cute to kill.
And maybe, I mean, in some cases it could be, but I don't know.
I mean, like aphids, you said, right? So I don't know, like I don't know, when humans see baby monkeys, they also don't want to hurt them because they remind us of our children. Who knows, like some spiders do like parental care. Maybe they have a sense of cuteness when you think about it.
I mean, they must have some sort of kin recognition ability and a sense of, so in order to care for something, they must have something that they quote unquote value. Of course, how these things come about with like very simple, like maybe 50 neurons or something, it's just unbelievable, and it's very complex in that way. What else is on the table for you? Like, how is your main area of research going, like your academic work going?
Like my current job is like the Zoological Museum is gonna get a new dinosaur exhibit next year, 2023. Where we get at least 4 full dinosaur skeletons from the Dinosaur Museum in Aartal, which is a bit more south of Zurich. And that one was a private museum that in the 90s and still today was excavating stuff in the Morrison Formation. Like they found Big Al, for example, and Big Al 2, and many such famous specimens.
Wow.
Sophie the Stegosaurus, which is now in the NHS also. NHM, not NHS is something different. The Natural History Museum of London, that's what I mean.
Stegosaurus in the NHS, probably, I don't know, some more millions of years before it's called up for treatment.
Basically, like that museum is privately owned by a man named Kirby Sieber, who, like, there is a biography of him, but it's only in German so far. But if it ever is in English, you should read it. It's very interesting, this man's life.
Must be one of those larger than life characters.
Really. But basically, like he owns the museum, and he personally owns the specimens. But because he is not the youngest anymore, and because it is a lot of work of like maintaining all this stuff, like he did not want to burden his children. They also didn't want it, so he chose to donate those specimens to our museum, which is state-owned.
Oh, that's very kind of him. Well, so, I mean, sorry,
and currently what my job is for all of this is for like the upcoming exhibit to like write texts about the reconstruction history of these texts. So like we're getting a Hesperosaurus skeleton, so I have to like research how have a Stegosaurus been reconstructed through the past. And of course you find a lot of funny stuff there. Like in 1920 there was this one guy who thought that Stegosaurus could use its back plates to glide
Yeah,
Have you seen that one?
I've seen that one. I always used to think it was like an April Fool's joke or something.
No, I've seen the original newspaper article where it was supposed to be. It was not on April Fool's. It was like in August of 1920.
Well,
and the guy who wrote that article was apparently like a legit guy. I think W.H. Balu, who also did a lot of illustrations for Edward Brinker Cope.
Well, I didn't know he was for real. I mean, I've heard of that idea, but it's just so bonkers that it just, I always use like, if it was real, maybe whoever who proposed it, I always assumed he was like a maybe airplane designer or something, or maybe he saw something in common with biplanes and plate trains.
I don't think he was a paleontologist, but he was a natural history illustrator. That's how he like got to illustrate a bunch of dinosaurs. And I know, I guess the basic idea for why he thought it might fly is because it's a bird-hipped dinosaur. I think that was his main reason. So it is in some way related to birds, so maybe it had some aerial capabilities. And
yeah, people have these amazing categorical distinctions. I remember that in like, I don't remember the source, but in the 1930s or 1910s, there was this effort to connect turtles with birds, actually.
I remember hearing about that in like an Aaron Ra video, but I never followed up on that. But they are
basically, they looked at a sea turtle, and it was like the most like grade 0 set theory type philosophy, that they said if turtles have beaks, birds also have beaks. Therefore, turtles are birds. And then they drew connections between basically a sea turtle's foreflippers and a bird's wings. I mean, they kind of look similarly jointed, but then I remember there was illustration in which they tried to draw a sea turtle as bird-like as possible. And this was like a 1920s or 1910s woodcut, but basically the scales were kind of exaggerated, so they looked almost feather-like, and the beak and the eyes were very bird-like. But
you have to send me that if you find it again. That sounds amazing.
I can't remember. If any of our viewers remember, please like comment it on the links. And going back to your job now, I get this question a lot, and I'm sure like you must get it too. And in a way, you are very lucky because you have answered it. And like, if somebody is interested in speculative evolution or natural history, how should that person go about to planning his or her career? I mean, I find the solution in a very different way. I work in advertising during the days, but you have a more closely aligned career. Maybe you can have some info on how to apply for jobs. It's like a kind of a boring question, but it's actually something that I get asked a lot.
It's also a bit difficult to answer that because I did not apply for this job. I was found by Dennis. Basically, like, he read my blog one day and saw that I was nearby and asked, "Hey, you want an internship?"
Whoa.
And that's literally how it came about. So I was very lucky with that. Like, but I get like, yeah, basically, I don't know how.
If that offer hadn't happened, how do you think you would have gone about planning your career, maybe in academics or?
I always wanted to write my own books, honestly, like not because academic life, it is interesting at times, but I don't think I would want to do this as like an actual full-time job.
Same here.
Yeah, I'd rather want to do my own thing. So ever since I started my university years, I've started writing some project, and then like I get stalled and I get the next idea and I try that and I leave that unfinished. Like, I have so many unfinished things.
I guess a good takeaway from this could be that to all of our viewers, that if you're interested about something, write about it. Maybe invest a little in writing skills. I mean, it's actually quite simple to write, but it's actually takes quite a bit of learning for myself as well. Basically, to write something down on paper, like how to go from idea A to idea B, to how to list your ideas, how to form simple sentences. Yeah. And if you're passionate about something, you write about it, and like your example, someone will read it. and for good results, hopefully.
Yeah, like what you're saying, like my blog did help me a lot with like sorting. Like I originally just started that blog because I had a lot of thoughts about paleontology history and paleo art history, and I know I just needed I don't know the English word, a ventil to let that out. A vent, that's the word.
Vent it out.
Yeah, like vent it out. So I just made this blog, like I saw, like I think I got the idea while reading Mark Whitten's blog. I saw, he used this site, a Blogspot. Anyone can make a blog on that. So I'll just make my own. And I just started writing whatever came to my mind, and which fit the idea of the blog. Like the first couple of posts were like this thesis I had, remember, like the alien prehistoric world trope, that there was like a close connection between like science fiction and our imagination of what alien life is like and how we have depicted dinosaurs. That was the first idea I got out. Then the first really popular post I wrote was like the weirdest thoughts people had about pterosaurs, and I also just wrote about that because there was a big bird just by my window. Sorry. Like we have like buzzards here around, and
actual buzzards.
Yeah, I don't
or
like Mäusebussard, we call them in German. I don't know what the English name is, but they're like hawks.
Gigantic bone-eating ones, are they?
No, that's a vulture you're thinking of.
Sorry.
I mean, those also live here in Switzerland, but like further south in the Alps, like the Lemmergeier and stuff. But we have like these like hawk things and ravens. Anyway, I was writing pterosaurs. That fits. Like I simply read about all these like strange ideas people had about pterosaurs. I think I also after reading some books by Gregory S. Paul and Mark Whitten, and I just wanted to sort them out into like one comprehensive thing that I could later look back at. And it, for some reason, became very popular. Like the title, I think, and the first few images were already captivating enough, so people kept reading.
Yes, and this brings me to my next question for you, actually. And the next question I get from many people is that how to be a researcher, because in this day and age, many people younger than ourselves, for some reason, because maybe they grown up in the smartphone era, there is this wrong assumption that all human knowledge is already on the internet or even already in YouTube or Instagram. But how would you recommend? I mean, I have an answer for this myself, but I want to ask you first. How would you recommend paleo researchers or like researchers on any idea to proceed? Because one thing that's very, very unique about your writing is that it's very well researched, without sounding pedantic and overtly academic. Like, so that's. But how do you go? Like, what is your research cycle like? Do you randomly find something and then dig more around it, or do you like systematically research an area and branch outwards, or something else?
Like the most basic tip I can give anyone is to learn how referencing works and how to read a bibliography, because then you can just based off one book like build up basically a network of references. If you understand, this guy is quoting this guy, and you go to the bibliography and you see, this was published here and there, and then you basically can look up anyone's claims that way.
I also think it's a very good practice to, like, if any of you viewers want to become like science writers or just want to be like bloggers or something, always to keep, like, if you're interested in something, for example, just for me, maybe it's about like snakes in Turkish literature, and you randomly read books like for a summer vacation or whatever. If you see something that interests your mind, write that down, like keep a little notebook and write that interesting thing down with the source, with the page number, and then categorize these. So maybe you have some references about pterosaur evolution or like snakes in Turkish literature, or I don't know, some like weird legends from Swiss mountains or something. Like, and I think like old school reading is always a very good, like, because it keeps your mind sharp and you keep acquiring new information. And like our minds, we think linearly, but when we read things, like we are exposed to that writer's point of view, and always opens up new like. So I think it's called blind research in academic circles, but it's very important.
Yeah.
Also, a very good idea, I think. I when I used to go to vacations in Italy or something, you know, it's a nice seaside holiday. One day I would take off, and every little town in Italy has a public library. Go there, and I don't know how to read Italian, but I would just look at these like local books. Like there's an amazing wealth of information in any language that's just sitting in libraries waiting to be digitized. And when you're in a library, you're also researching blind, like something catches your eye on the shelf, and then you discover a new angle that you never had thought before. So
Yeah, that happens to me sometimes. Like I remember there is this one book I am trying to write about, like fossils of Switzerland, like little project for myself, and I had to look up a 1980s paper about a fossil site in the Czech Republic, in Rhynia, which is from the Carboniferous, because that was like the closest reference I could find to like tetrapods that from this time and the general area. And it was nowhere online, so I went, of course, to the Zentralbibliothek, the central library in Zurich. And when I do stuff like that, I of course go directly to the book, but on the way I always see like some, like from the corner of my eye, like some interesting books. And sometimes I just take like a screenshot with my phone of the cover and like the number and stuff, so I can find them later. I found some really fascinating stuff that were like a 1980s book about the geography of the moon. Which might be a good segue into like the next topic.
Whoa, unbelievable. Wow. So this is Johannes Kepler's vision of the world and space.
That's what we originally wanted to talk about.
Yeah. Our plan was that, but
but no,
we diverged into many random errors, and it's many random areas.
I mean, that's the fun part about podcasting, isn't it?
Yeah. So now, actually, it's been an hour, and a really like loud and disturbing kind of trap music started in the background.
I don't hear it.
You don't hear it? Okay.
No, it's fine for me.
So yeah, maybe let's call the last 15 minutes of this interview, and then we can come back, or we can just go on and go onwards. I mean, Johannes Kepler, I know I did an illustration about his works.
Yeah, I have it. Wait, I have it right here by me.
All right. I hope none of our viewers are exposing themselves to this infernal trap music in the background. I hope you can't hear it.
I barely hear it.
Really cranking up the bass here. But anyways, okay, so you're reflecting it on the screen now.
Yeah, it's like on my iPad.
Oh, unbelievable. So yes, this was one of our common areas of interest. Basically, I was just looking at Kepler's view of space and alien evolution, and it was during the COVID lockdowns. So my wife and I, we were like viewing the entire Studio Ghibli animation series. So like every night there was Ponyo or Totoro or Pompoko, which is one of the greatest. So I wanted to create a kind of Miyazaki-esque fantasy. But you know, I mean, what are you gonna do? Just like some creatures on an airplane or something? So I had this Kepler book in the corner of my mind. Okay, so and I'm gonna give it the honorary Studio Ghibli treatment. So if you show it to the camera now, that's why the colors are very bright. I actually shamelessly used on Photoshop, used the eyedropper tool to steal the colors of the skies and steal the colors of the seas and the reds and the landscapes from some screenshots. But then I made the thing. And I mean, you actually read Kepler's work from start to finish. Whereas I only used some references I could find.
It is actually like the actual story part of the book is stupidly short. Like, wait, I'm holding it right now. 26 pages.
Oh.
Like, yeah, but here's the caveat. There's like an additional 80 pages of annotations.
Anna, for just those 26 pages?
Yeah, like almost every sentence has like an annotation where Kepler explains, I describe it this way and that way because of this research I have done. But should I tell the people that are listening what the book is about first?
Yes, please. Yeah. Let's go with an introduction there.
So the book is called Somnium, or which means sleep or the dream. And it is written by Johannes Kepler, a famous German astronomer and astrologer. It needs to be mentioned. Like back in those days in...
Küçük çay alabilir miyim abi? I just ordered a little tea, but do go on.
Yeah, it's fine. Like it should be mentioned that back in those days, like we're talking about the early 17th century, astronomy and astrology were basically the same thing. Like people were not studying the sky purely out of like scientific research, but because they hoped that if they can correctly predict the motions of the planets and the stars, they could maybe also predict other things about the future.
Acts of the kings, and I think also alchemy was a big part of that
like
too.
Kepler actually was the court astrologer of the German emperor for some time when he was in Prague.
So like many of our viewers might find it surprising, but a lot of science actually evolved out of anti-science, and I think it's also one of our common interests to like chart the evolution of the scientific progress as well, scientific knowledge as well. So I read this Rhynia, and he predicts, he thinks the moon is a very like protean changing realm. There are like one hour there are these oceans and seas, and the next hour it's frozen. Next hour it's boiling.
Let me go on more a bit.
Please do.
Yeah. So the book was originally written in 1608, I believe, but it was only published 4 years after Kepler's death by his son, for probably very particular reasons. So basically, Kepler was writing this. We need to go actually a lot further back than Kepler. We need to go back to like the Copernican revolution to really explain the full context, really. So like for the majority of like late antiquity and the Middle Ages, people believed in the Ptolemaic model of the universe, which was not just geocentric. So like Earth was not just in the center of the universe, but Earth was basically the whole material world, because it was thought that the Earth was encased in multiple crystal spheres. Like that idea goes all the way back to Aristotle, like in like I think 7 to like 24 crystal spheres, and which are made of a material called ether. And the planets are not physical objects like the Earth, but simply were like stickers made on, like plastered onto these shells that like around the Earth. So like for most of that time, people did not think of the moon or Mars or Venus as objects that one could potentially walk on. Well, you still can't walk on.
So they were just like things up on the ceiling.
Yeah, basically. That was the idea. Like
fascinating.
There was this idea that beyond the sphere of the moon, the world was perfect. That was where like God or like angelic beings lived, and that was the unchanging world. Like all the motions are like in perfect, like everything is in perfect motion, and new things cannot appear there and stuff.
Were the stars all on the same crystal sphere, or did they have multiple?
I believe they were all on the last sphere. I think that was the general belief.
That actually makes perfect sense from their point of view, because like
that is
how
the
would
thing.
you...
The thing is, the Ptolemaic model was so like long-lived because you could accurately predict things with it. Yeah, and then of course like once like the instruments improved and people found out, wait, this does not like our observations do not add up with this model anymore. Like that's when like Copernicus and Galileo came and like changed it around to the heliocentric model. And
can I just mention a little parenthesis about a science fiction story with a similar premise? It's called Crystal Spheres by David Brin. That's Brin. And in this story, they launched this faster than light ship. Suddenly, the entire area of stars around the Earth shatters because turns out the last crystal sphere was real. So they actually spent centuries trying to destroy these meteors that resulted from the smashing of the last celestial sphere. And when they defeat them, they actually realize this was like a test, built-in test of intelligence, because if you manage in this story faster than light speed, if you shatter the sphere, and if you manage to combat the asteroids, then you are cleared as a galactic intelligent species to join the Federation of Spacefaring Galactic Species.
There is a very similar book by Terry Pratchett. It's called Strata, where it's about like this alien race that builds like fake planets with like fake geologic history. So the people who are eventually placed on the planet will believe they evolved naturally. And at some point in the story, they find this weird ball in space, and they go inside, and it's a flat Earth with like a geography reminiscent of like these medieval maps, and like it's strongly implied the people there like are later evacuated to like a replica of our modern Earth, and it's like implied. So like all those maps, all those like star models and stuff were real at some point. They were just living on a different planet.
But those are very good, very good. There's, I think, an entire genre of like alternative, let's say not speculative evolution, but speculative physics like that.
Alternative cosmology, I think, is the best term.
There was also another book about, the name eludes me, but it was about what if the Ptolemaic view of the universe was correct, and basically they go like, it's set in the present day, but ancient Greek civilization has survived until the present day, but all the physics are like Ptolemaic physics. So actually, they have.
I remember you talked about this one in like one of your previous videos. I remember.
Yes,
and
but
they perform space travel by simply putting a piece of the moon on their ship because it's lighter than everything.
Yeah, it floats. It was unbelievable, and they had like spontaneous generation as a science. So basically, they just leave some hay and like mix it with sweat or something to create little baby sheep, which they then like slaughter and eat on the spaceship. It was very. They also had these like anti-parabolic trajectories, because in those days people used to think that physics, if you like shoot a gun from here, it goes here, and if it runs out of energy, it drops. It's like a direct sawtooth triangle. So they have weapons that fire that way. Actually, it's basically combining like a howitzer and a mortar, and you can't hide behind the defilade. It was like fun. But anyways, going back to your narrative of the Copernican revolution.
Of course, there was like growing, like once the Renaissance and the early modern period started, there was like growing doubts about this model with Giordano Bruno, Copernicus, Galileo, and stuff. And of course, they promoted this geocentric. But technically, Giordano Bruno did not actually promote a geocentric model, but was firmly of the opinion that there was no single center of the universe. So he already had quite a modern view that way. But that was, of course, even more radical.
Yeah. Very ballsy move. I mean, in those days.
Like Giordano Bruno, people kind of sometimes underestimate why he was put to the stake. It was not just because he said the Earth does not revolve, the sun does not revolve around the Earth, but he also said some religious things that were quite heretical at the time. Like I think he promoted a view of pantheism that simply was not in line with the Catholic Church. But I think we will get back to Bruno later. So basically, of course, like Copernicus proposes his idea of heliocentrism. But he himself also had some problems with that model, because Copernicus still assumed that all the motions of the planets are perfectly circular. So like the moon and the Earth and Mars and Venus like revolve around the sun in like perfect circles, which does not quite add up if you like, for example, track the movement of Mars across the sky. You see it sometimes goes
it's not a perfect
direction,
circle.
and it completely goes back, and then it goes further again.
Did they come up with an intermediate, like not crystal spheres, but bouncy ball spheres, basically? That's
no, like similar. They created something called epicycles. So the planets move around the sun, and on their orbit they also revolve around an invisible point. So it's like an orbit within an orbit.
Yeah.
So that was the way they fixed it back then. And Kepler's major contribution to all of astronomy to this very day are, of course, his Keplerian laws. And the basic premise is that the planets do not revolve around objects in perfect circles, but in ellipses, which is the simplest way with which you can actually explain these motions across the sky.
So before Kepler, no one had thought about the inhabitants of these spheres, or like
that is not true. That is then the idea of heliocentrism goes actually farther back than Copernicus. Like the ancient Greeks were already thinking about stuff like that. Like Aristarchus of Samos, like from ancient Greece, I think like 300 BC. He already proposed that the sun revolves around, that the Earth revolves around the sun. Yeah.
But did any of these people imagine like the inhabitants of other spheres, or like things living on the sun or something like that?
There is one novel by Lukian of Samosata. He was a Syrian living in Samsat, which is today Turkey. Yeah, like he wrote Vera Historia, which I think today is mostly translated as true story or true history.
Is it the one about the ship that gets caught in a water spout?
Exactly.
Or a
it's about like a cruise similar to the Odyssey, and there is like a giant storm that picks up the ship and throws it into space. And from space they sail to the moon, where they like a race of aliens that is like all male members, and they reproduce by fucking each other in the knee.
Oh my god.
Yeah. And they go to war with people on the sun by having spiders weave a net between the sun and the moon, and then they walk across the net.
The more I learn about these stories, it seems that there was like a genre of these, and there must have been so many like crazy kneecap shagging, spider riding, tornado dwelling science fiction tales that must have been lost.
There is a reason why that is, because Lukian was not for real. Like what he was writing was satire, actually. He was actually like, there apparently were many novels at the time, according to him, and that claimed to be like this, but also claimed to be real or to be a real ancient myth. And basically, what Lukian was, he called the novel True Story because in the first sentence it is truthful about the fact that it's all made up. So he wrote, the point he was trying to make is any asshole can write down whatever they want into a book and then claim it to be like an authentic myth that maybe is true, you know, and then like sell it that way. And what he is basically writing is like the most ridiculous things he could come up with to illustrate that fact. And
in a way, it's similar to those crazy American newspapers, National Enquirer and all that, like where they says bat baby gives birth to a six-headed spider child, or like.
Yeah, but Lukian was explicitly trying to teach his readers something about credibility and not being the thing. But the thing is, what this probably tells us is that he probably did not actually believe that interstellar travel was possible, that there were people on the moon. Especially since around his time, the Ptolemaic model was already developing. Like Ptolemy lived around the same time as Lukian, in the 2nd century AD.
I think in the last 5 or 8 years, at least one flat earth believer must have found this story, and contrary to its writer's expectations, they must have said, there's the evidence, the ancients knew about it, and that kind of stuff.
There are still people in the US that believe in heliocentrism. And so geocentrism. I keep mixing it up. Sorry, they still believe in geocentrism. Interestingly, I've seen one who believes in the Tychonic model, which with which I think we can keep up again with Kepler, because Tycho Brahe was his teacher in astronomy.
True.
Yeah, and Tycho's model was that the Earth is still the center of the universe, and the sun revolves around it, but everything else revolves around the sun. Which is how we try to reconcile like the observations with like the theological argument.
A kind of halfway theory.
Yeah.
So how do the contemporary believers like what do they find in this theory? Maybe a little closer to God, or?
I don't know. It's been a really long time since I read about the modern geocentrists, but
someone also should do like a genuine study about the kind of flat earth lore produced in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Because some of them really go through like wild mental gymnastics to convince themselves of these.
That is the thing though, like all of that lore is modern, like it made up today, because already in ancient times nobody believed anymore that the earth was flat. Like you already had Eratosthenes who almost correctly could calculate the circumference of the spherical Earth.
So I mean, but I mean that I think the flat Earth lore is like an entire field of study in itself. So anyone wanting to embark on a long and arduous research trip, or maybe wanting to do a PhD, there's your one of your subjects cut out for you.
Yeah, I bet that would be a very good research subject for anthropologists or folklorists, because it tells a lot about human psychology, how people can like basically turn the whole universe into their fan fiction.
Yeah, very true. And also that there is these like genres of like, so some of them are like they are trying to deceive us, or some of them are like the ancients were right. Like there's areas of overlap usually, but like when you're committing to a something like the flat earth, some of them are like more like about a very contemporary form of dare I say American ego gratification, which is to say like, here is one man and he asks one question and he was right, and that kind of thing. Whereas others are like more like occult or like hidden sacred knowledge. Some of that bleeds into these like anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Like I've even seen things like the Jews are hiding the flat earth from us.
Like literally every modern conspiracy theory you could think of goes somehow back to Jews. That's like the very like conspiracy theories are fun when it's about like Bigfoot or aliens and stuff, but like at some point I bet there is some Bigfoot conspiracy theory that also has something to do with Jews. Like for some reason they always like these theories always find a way to make it anti-Semitic. It's a ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like there is legit this one like UFO abductee who claimed there's two races of aliens. One is evil and has long noses. The other one is blonde and Aryan.
Oh my God!
Like he made aliens anti-Semitic, and I'm like,
there's also alien Aryans and alien. Oh
yeah, like that is actually a significant part of like this modern UFO folklore, that there's like these Nordic aliens.
Yeah, true. I mean, George Adamski was the first to suggest these like really blonde. Yeah. But
I think he was the one who also proposed that there's these long-nosed aliens.
Was it Adamski?
I think
I don't know.
He invented Jewish aliens. Yeah, I think so.
I remember, like, I mean, based on my sketchy readings of this UFO lore, before like the gray aliens became popular, the best way to imagine aliens was these like Nordic, like angelic things, because there was no other template for alien creatures, or like they saw them as like ascended people basically.
Yeah,
which they were also like, to me as a child, I was reading a lot of UFO magazines and stuff. they were scarier than the gray aliens, because a gray alien to me was like, okay, a monster basically, but something who's like uncannily human with like extremely bright and
there is one thing worse than a monster, and it's a racist.
Oh, it's very, very true. I mean, I used to be like more lenient about these flat earthers and stuff, especially like before, let's say 2018, 2020. But towards 2020, I would say, okay, let live and let live. You know, these are like just these normal quirky guys. You know, they have
they're not hurting anyone.
But then they suddenly and rhizomically metamorphosed into the QAnon movement so fast that it was like this kind of like a threshold of polarization had been crossed, and I was like, whoa, okay, maybe live and let live, but also preach what you know is right, you know. But that's a whole other area of popular culture, and of course the stresses the stresses societies are laboring under today with all the wars and currency crises. And also it really doesn't help that some conspiracies are true. So like the coup attempt in Turkey, or like the whole Epstein debacle in the United States. So like you can never be so sure. So yikes in that way.
Yeah.
So I guess
heavy topic we got to.
Okay, we got to the heavy area, but we've been talking close to 2 hours now, but any closing remarks you want to make, on any closing remarks or recommendations with Kepler or our areas of study?
I don't know, I feel like we need to make part 2 sometime.
Definitely. I mean, this has not been enough, and thank you so much for your time and your patience, and thanks to everyone who's viewing. And please, if you liked this chat, support Timur's channels and Timur's Patreon. I mean, you're supporting me too, and that's really appreciated. Please also consider supporting Timur's page, and please take a look at his blog. I think you got enough down. Like if you do a good editing, like if you edit your blog, it could make a really nice popular science book as it is now. So much respect and much thanks from my side. And thank you for your time once again. And any other closing points, closing comments?
Yesterday I watched Jurassic World Dominion in the cinema. And it definitely was a better series finale than Rise of Skywalker.
Oh yes. That kind of crap is hard to match. I mean,
I know it doesn't sound like a compliment now that I think about it, but like what I mean, and it's the movie. I like the movie.
Yeah. I'm gonna see Jurassic World tomorrow, maybe, or Jurassic. What's it called? Jurassic World. Dominion. Yes. Which is actually like, the name is unsettlingly close to The Domination, which is, you know, this extremely strange alternative history book by S.M. Sterling. It's about basically everything goes as wrong as it can in the past 200 years, and the group of super racist South Afrikaners end up dominating the planet with nuclear weapons and spaceships. And
I think I remember hearing about
Draka domination.
Like what was like this YouTube channel, alternative history. How he made like a 3-part video where he looked at like the old history iceberg. I think he did one at some point.
Oh man! So from Jurassic World to the Drakas, we have so much more we could talk about. So there will be a second part in the upcoming months. I promise you that. And thank you so much for your time. And
it was a pleasure.
Yes, have a nice day, and thanks to you all for listening to us. We can stop recording.
Okay. So
okay, we shut off goodbye. We shut off the thing, and you send it to me on Google Drive, and I'll post it.
Okay, I will stop recording now.